I hope this isn't going to be too dry a subject. This is something that really applies to all associations, even if you're a homeowners association that is not a condominium, because all of us have something to maintain in our communities. So we're going to give you some ideas on that. And I think that one of the things that we'll be doing today, I think, is helping you with your other board members. We all have a tendency to try to get 3 bids, and that's a carryover from, I guess, the government. The government always says that they're going to get 3 bids because they see that there's some sense of fairness to that process. And one of the things that we'll be discussing today is the fact that that isn't always practical for us to do for various reasons. Also getting to know your vendors, thinking about what maintenance means for your particular community. So I'll try to be general, but as always, if you have any particular questions about your association, don't hesitate to ask. Definitely don't wait until the end of the session. The board of directors, we're responsible as board members for all of the common areas. And that may seem like a very simple statement, but it isn't. One of the things that you have to do is figure out what those common areas are. Even in subdivisions that are homeowners associations, that's not as clear as it might be. You need to check your plats to know what your common areas are. They don't always look like common areas. And sometimes when you are entering a board of directors that's been in existence for a long time, you may assume that some areas are private property where they're not, where the owners are extending their yards, for example, and extending their yards into the common area and mowing that because they think it looks nice. And then suddenly that person sells their home and the person buying it says, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to take care of this. I don't really like to cut grass. I'm not going to cut those extra 15 feet. And you're sending or asking us to send a letter to the owner telling them to maintain their yard, whereas in actuality, it's common area. So it's good that you know what your common area is. In townhomes and condominiums, there are many elements that are different in different associations. The most common ones that I can think of are fences and patios. In some associations, it may even be balconies. Some associations require that the owners maintain the fence, even though they're a limited common element. And other associations, the association will do that. So you as a board need to know which is which before you kind of jump off and trying to decide, oh, we need to maintain this. Sometimes your documents are not clear. Many times they're not clear. And so it could be that even after looking at the documents with your manager, you will need to consult an attorney who can check with you and just see if there's some way you can determine that. And in some cases, you may have to make a determination as a board of directors about what the association will maintain. But be careful with that. Don't extend the responsibility of all of the owners to cover one particular situation. An example of that would be in associations where there is water damage caused by a broken water line or a sewer line. Another, usually it is water, or a roof leak. And you may say, well, this person has ceiling damage. It's a condominium or townhome. This person has ceiling damage, which is the result of a roof leak. And so as a board, we're going to go in and we're going to make those interior repairs. That may seem the fair thing to do and the right thing to do, but you do want to make sure that your governing documents allow you to do that. There are associations where the documents are very clear and say that regardless of the source of the water damage, regardless of who is responsible for that maintenance issue, the interior repairs are always the responsibility of the owner. And we've got a couple of people here who are with high-rises. I'll say you've got, what, 4 or 5 stories over there at Worthen, and then we've got, I think, what does Terrazzo have? Terrazzo has 12 stories or something. 12? 10? So how many? 15, right, 15 stories. Well, they have considerations too because the association may be responsible for some things that ordinarily would be the owner's responsibility because of the way the buildings are plumbed, the way the lines are, the way the walls and floors are built. So we do need to know not just, yes, it's the board's responsibility, but what exactly are we responsible for? Remembering that if you don't make the decisions, who will? And as much as you can be proactive in this, even with an association that's been around for a while, the better off you'll be. If you start thinking about some of these things that could happen, particularly in the newer communities, and you think about how you're going to address it as a board of directors, you've done your homework, then when the question comes up, an owner comes up and says, I just had ceiling damage because the roof leaked, you know what the answer is. You've talked to the manager, maybe even gotten an opinion to help guide you so that you don't spend money unnecessarily and commit the association to something that over the long run could be very, very expensive. Many of the community associations that we have managed for many years that are condominiums have been maintaining the interiors, and I can tell you they have spent tens of thousands of dollars. They established precedents that were very, very difficult to get away from. So it's really, really important that you, as I say, know where you are on that. As always, that phrase that the managers always talk about, your goal is to preserve, enhance, and protect the value of your homes, your individual homes, and also of the community as a whole. Some examples of common area. Paved surfaces. Again, that's not cut and dried. Some associations are responsible for maintaining some of the streets and alleys. Others are not. We have some that you might look at some associations, particularly when they're contiguous. You have some associations that are next to others. Sometimes they have some shared arrangements. I love to use my place as an example. As you know, I live in condominium property that is next to two other community associations that are also condominiums. When the developer built them, he built a road. It looks like a city street, but it isn't. A road that connects from Old Hickory Boulevard down to another public street. This road is not named and was never deeded to anybody. It's just there. And so over time, the three associations, actually very early in their life, the three community associations decided that they would maintain this road and then split the expenses on a pro rata basis based on the number of units in the home. It's worked really well for them because it's in legal limbo. They would love to turn it over to the city. City won't take it because the road is not up to city standards. So again, don't assume when you're looking at your community and you're thinking, well, what are we going to be responsible for in 10 years? Don't think, oh, the city is going to come in and pay that. Could be not. Or it could be, oh, well, it's very obviously a part of that other association. It may not be. So be sure those maps, those plats that are recorded are a very, very good source in addition to your governing documents. Signs, gates, gates on fences. If you have gates, somebody's going to have to maintain them. That's going to be you in most cases, and you want to be thinking about the long-term maintenance. Gates are a lot of work. I know several people have gates. They always go wrong, and they go wrong on weekends of holidays. And when it's going to be very expensive, right? When it's going to be very expensive to get somebody out there. So we'll be talking about preventive maintenance as much as that's possible with gates. We even have people, we have one association not represented today, where people systematically, routinely run into the gate. They just, that's their way. Oh, is that true there? Oh, gosh. Well, we have two associations where they do that then. 3, really? Yes. Oh, gosh, I didn't know that. And, you know, that's a lot of money. So you need to be planning for that because it's just going to happen. Pool equipment. Now, this is something that we don't always think about unless we've had a reserve study. Your pool will not last forever in the state that it's in today. It's going to need work. It's going to need work not only on the things that you see, like the paving surfaces and the deck and the furniture. That pump room is going to need work. The codes change, and things wear out. So you do want to be thinking about how you're going to take care of that pool equipment. And really, the best thing to do is to be thinking about that now when the pool closes. Are we going to need a new pump? Don't wait until May to replace it. Get those guys to do it for you in the wintertime. It'll cost you less, and also you'll be ready when the pool season begins next May or June. There are also some areas that you may not consider maintenance, but are part of the services that the association provides. And in communities with dumpsters, it's pretty obviously trash pickup. Some associations, even subdivisions, also offer the service of trash pickup. So it becomes part of the maintenance of the association in the sense that you are dealing with some contractor who is providing trash pickup. Another would be related to that, of course, would be recycling, which some places are lucky enough to have. And another is termites. Again, something you don't think about. If you have a subdivision, if you're in a subdivision and you have common area buildings, you have a clubhouse, you've got a pump room, you've got a gazebo, not too sure about the gazebo, you should consider getting a company to take a look at that and get some kind of coverage for that building, because these termites can do a lot of damage. Something we don't always think about in a subdivision. Your manager is very much a part of this, but it's good for you to be aware that this is happening. Your manager knows your community. If we've just recently taken over your community, we're in the process of knowing it, and we are looking at the things that we're describing to you. But one thing that we can't do is establish the level of maintenance that you want. I think that in an ideal world, all of us would look the way that we looked when the buildings were brand new. But not all of us are in brand new buildings. Certainly John isn't. He's in a place, in an old manufacturing facility that was created, that was converted to residential use. And he's never going to look the way that place is never going to look the way it did in 1880, and he probably doesn't want it to. So they have to decide, just as you do, what is the look that we want to have? What level of maintenance do we want? That's going to cover things like landscaping. Do we want to cut the shrubs more often? Do we want to cut them twice a year? Do we want to cut them 3 times a year? What kind of a look does that give to the community? What do we do about the parking areas and striping? Do we want to just wait until it's all faded and nobody can read it? Or do we want to have some kind of a plan where we restripe and number parking spaces, say, on every 3 years? If you have common elements, hallways, or the clubhouse or the pool area, how do you want to maintain the fences? Do you want to go through and just do replace boards and sections of fencing as it's needed, or do you want to have some kind of a plan where you're going to replace that whole fence in, say, 5 or 6 years? The same thing for pool furniture. Think about what you want your place to look, your community to look like. As we say every month, you are the community leaders. You're the ones, you're listening to the other owners, but you're the ones who are going to be making decisions and taking the lead to maintain that level, whatever you all want that to be in your community. One of the elements is the frequency, which I was talking about before. Paving is actually not a bad example. If you have, you may not even mark your parking spaces, but you may have some paved areas that you're responsible for. How often do you top coat? Are you going to have a plan where you say, we're going to top coat every 3 years, which actually isn't a bad idea. 3 to 4 years in this climate, I think, is pretty good. That actually adds life to your paving. And if you're planning for that and you're putting that into your budget, which is something that we talked about, I think, last month or the month before, then it's going to be very easy for you. You've set up a schedule, you've established the frequency that you want for this particular maintenance item, and you're providing the money to make sure that you can do it when it happens. How long will it take? And that might seem like a funny thing, but when you're thinking about it, you say, how long does a job take? We'll talk about that a little bit later when we're referring to whether we need to get bids or not. But some jobs take a long time. Sometimes you have to split a job up so that because you don't have the money to do it at one time, or because of the nature of it, it can't be done at one time. Paving is another good example. You can't pave your complete community in one day because where's everybody park? So there's some staging that has to go on in that. Frequently, associations have roofing projects that extend for several years, and the reason for that is that they want to be able to have an easier cash flow. It also is less of a burden on individual owners. You may have fences. Some associations have large fence responsibilities. There are homeowner associations, subdivisions that we manage that have perimeter fencing that they must go on for miles. It's pretty obvious they're not going to wake up one day and say, oh, guess we've got to replace the fencing. They better be thinking about that now and then deciding how they're going to do it in sections so that it's visibly attractive and also maintains all of that fencing. And then you have to decide if something is being maintained adequately. Obviously, your manager is a part of this, and we'll be talking about the manager's role in this toward the end of this session. But how can you determine that something is maintained adequately? One is, how often does it break? Are you having a lot of roof problems, for example? If you're having really a lot of roof problems and you're having them in certain buildings, or you're having them in a certain type of construction, you're having it in all of the valleys of a particular design of building, or you're seeing that the pool pump is breaking down twice every year, or whatever it is. If you're seeing this stuff happen a lot, it's telling you, that's one indicator that whatever it is isn't being maintained adequately. You either need to up your preventive maintenance program, or you need to replace it and then start maintaining whatever it is that you replace. Whatever you're doing in all of this, and we always say this too, let the owners know what you're doing. Sometimes you may have a plan that isn't going to start until next spring. You've decided that you are going to paint all of the fencing around the pool, for example, because the fence looks terrible. And everybody's been complaining about it all year, and it came up at the annual meeting, And I mean, if there's one thing that can be done, it's that fence behind the pool. So the board gets together, and the board says, okay, we're going to take care of it, and then we're going to start probably March, weather permitting, but it'll definitely be done by the end of May. Well, if you keep that to yourselves, you have all of that ownership that's just going to let this fester all winter long. Let them know that that's the plan. And it could be for anything. It could be something that they don't know about. The owners may not know that the pool pump goes out twice a year, and that you're saving up the money, and that you're going to have it taken care of in the spring. Let them know what you're doing. Again, you're the community leaders, but you're the volunteers, and I think it's good for people to know that you're spending a lot of time and effort and thought on the interests of your community, and that they will appreciate what you're doing and kind of buy into that. Remember, one of the things you're trying to do is not just now, but always think about the future and make people, other good people in your community, interested in running on the board when you get sick of running. Or serving, I should say. We have a couple of different types of maintenance, and that's on the other side of that sheet. I guess it's the purple one. Is it the purple one? Yes. Okay. And we've talked about it a little bit. One is routine maintenance, and the most obvious is your grass. I think everybody has some grass, even if it's just a little bit. And you probably have a contract with somebody to cut that grass on a regular basis. Some of you have windows to clean. A couple somebodies have windows to clean. How often do you clean your windows? Do you clean them once a year, twice a year? You have a contract for that. But it's routine maintenance. You might have hallways, clubhouse, things that are done on a routine, regular, ongoing basis. You don't always think of that as maintenance, but it really is. You have somebody maintaining the restrooms at the pool. You have somebody who takes out the garbage at the pool and makes sure that the deck is all cleaned up and the chairs are. All of those you would consider to be maintenance, routine maintenance items. The next items are preventive. This is where you can make a difference, because if you do something, you are extending the life of whatever it is. An example is the pool. And many of you do have pools. If you wait until that pool surface is really, really bad, you run a risk of a lot of things. It's going to cost you a lot more money, and it could be that some other things will kick in that will make you do things that you don't want to do because the health department will make you do it. If you do it on a more regular basis, it's going to be safer, it's going to be more attractive, and it will extend the life of your pool. Extend the life of your, remember that liner, you have a pool surface there, and it's to hold the water in. If you don't maintain that, and you start getting small cracks, which you really don't discover until you empty the pool, you could be in a situation where, and we had this, where they hadn't emptied the pool in many years. It was one of Jay's, and they didn't even know they were losing. They were losing water for so long, they didn't even know they were losing water. And I think I don't even know how much their water bills dropped. There was a massive crack that might have been in there ever since the pool was constructed, and it was built 10 years ago, and they had never really opened it up. So all these years they're wasting money on water that they didn't even know about. Plus, this crack got bigger, and in the course of resurfacing, they had to stop everything else and go in and make this massive repair. It actually replaced part of them, actually kind of dig it out and start all over again. So that's preventive maintenance. Emptying that pool out, having somebody in surface, fix the lights. That's another thing. The lights can go, they're not going to do very much light fixing when there's water in the pool. The next is scheduled maintenance, and that is pretty obviously something that you put on a schedule. And we'd use paving as an example. That is preventive, but you could also decide to do that every 2 or 3 years. And we do see some associations who do that. The gate repair, preventive maintenance, having your gate company come out and just check everything, even once a year or twice a year. A lot of contracts include maintenance and include those checks. Your elevator, if any of you have an elevator, your elevator company comes out once a year, and they completely inspect your elevator, and they tell the state that it's okay. They also will come out as needed. If you have a problem, they will come out as needed to make sure that everything is working properly. You don't have to wait until there's a problem, but they do that on a schedule basis. Believe it or not, you could consider termite coverage as scheduled, because they do the same thing. Once a year, and actually the state requires this, they come out and they conduct an inspection, and whenever they see termite activity, they treat. the termite companies, if they're good ones, also do you another favor because they will tell you where the moisture problems are. And so you have this nice little list of stuff that you would never notice at the ground level, and they're saying there's water collecting in this particular area by this foundation. They're telling you now, which actually they're telling the manager, so we can go in and take care of that before it becomes a big problem, before you get termite damage, and also have some maybe water infiltration into the building. So that's another kind of maintenance, pretty much emergencies. But it's good to budget for emergencies. It's nice to be in a situation where you can pay for it when it happens. Some people call that a contingency in their reserves. But do know that whatever you put into that budget is not all that's going to be spent if you don't put something aside for contingencies. It's very sad when an association has such a tight budget that when that emergency does occur and a couple of $1,000s has to be spent for something that was not covered by insurance, that something else has to be given up. And that's what happened. I use my place as an example. We've had a massive, we've had $50,000 in this year, 2011, spent on either lost water or the repairs of common water lines. $50,000, absolutely had to stop the whole painting renovation project because that ate up more than that budget, which is really a shame. In this particular case, I'm not too sure what we could have done about it. I'm not on the board, but I just know that makes a difference. But I do know they were able to pay the bills. And then they had to special assess. So those things can happen to you, and it's weird stuff. It could be trees. There are some insurance policies that will not pay for the removal of a fallen tree unless it hit something that they're insuring, namely a building. So we've had some storms over time where associations have incurred thousands of dollars in costs to remove dead trees from common areas. That would be good, and the insurance company didn't cover it because it didn't hit the clubhouse. So you've got to have some money in there. There's a good example of maintenance. Looking at your trees. If your landscaping company is not a tree company, we have several companies that we can contact for you to have them go out and take a look and evaluate your trees. Because a lot of times, if those trees are trimmed properly, you can reduce the likelihood of their blowing down in a very high windstorm the way we always get every spring. That's particularly true for Bradford pears. So you see, we're talking about all kinds of maintenance, not just buildings, everything that we're responsible for. The last one is the requested maintenance. And some of you think, well, that doesn't really apply to me because we don't live in a condominium or townhome. But you may have somebody who really has a thing about the sign. You may have an entrance sign that's really in bad shape, and they're going to wear the manager out saying that sign needs to be replaced or at least repainted. You may have things that come up that need to be done that people in condominiums and townhomes only seem to notice when they put their homes on the market, which can bring a lot of expense. So you need to have a repairs and maintenance budget for those odd things that will come up. So those are different kinds of maintenance, and it helps you, when you know that, it helps you kind of think about, I did the wrong, why do I do that? About how to approach something and think, well, is this going to happen all the time? Is it scheduled? Is it preventive? Somebody might say, well, why are you doing this? Why would you go in and replace the pool pump? It worked fine, it's never gone out. And we say, well, because the pool guy said that this pool pump is really over its age of 12 years. The chances of it failing around July 4th are close to 100%. So we decided to replace it. And you can say, and it happens. It doesn't happen on Memorial Day. It usually happens the 4th of July. So, see, laughing, they know. But if you could say, well, and this is, we didn't do our preventive maintenance, or we have done it as much as we can, and now we have to replace it. As much as you can articulate this instead of just being general, it really helps in the way that owners will understand why you're doing what you're doing. When do we need a bid? We don't always need bids. And bids are not always practical. We've had boards of directors that have said, I want every single thing bid. And I know in one case we parted company with the association. If somebody called and said they had a roof leak, they wanted the manager to obtain 3 bids to repair the roof. Now there are a couple of problems with this. Number one, it's a small item that needs to be taken care of because when it rains, obviously it's going to leak again. So there's a concern that we have for this person who will suffer some damage. Also, the roof damage could get worse over time because it can blow off and all the other things that can happen. The other thing is, the problem is, are we going to be able to get anybody to bid? And I can tell you, we will not. It costs contractors money to go out and look at a place. And for a job that's going to bring in a couple of $100s, I'd say pretty much less than $500, we're not going to be able to get anybody to bid. They're just flat out not going to do it. They'll tell you they will. They'll say, sure, I'll come out. There's a fence post here, and we've got this fence post, and we've got 3 rails that are off, and the board has told me to get 3 bids. Okay, fine, I'll be out there. Well, you're always going to be at the bottom of the list. It's not worth his time to send himself or one of his staff people out to give you a bid, which he assumes is also being done by somebody else, for a job that he has only a small percentage chance of getting. So you have to consider the cost of it. Are you going to be able to get a bid? Another thing you want to consider is how specialized is this work? And all of you have drainage issues. Even those of you in high-rise have drainage issues. And I can tell you that most landscapers do not have great expertise in drainage issues. They all know what we know, which is that water flows downward. They know that if they see water next to a building, they could dig a trench and they can carry it away in a rain. But they don't know any more than we do that what happens if you have a lot of rain. They don't know, although we know more than the landscaper. You have other things that are happening besides the water coming from the sky. You also have it coming from the roof and from the gutter system, maybe from other structures. All of these considerations that have to be made. And there are some people who specialize in drainage issues. Those people sometimes are ones that you need to be talking to, we need to be talking to on your behalf when you have a drainage issue. And it needs to be somebody who has some experience. They are hard to find. And some of them are very, very expensive. We have gotten to know the ones who like working with community associations, which means they don't mind having the owner input, which is a big deal. They don't mind indecisiveness because sometimes the board is very reluctant to make a decision and they let things drag out. And they also will be fairly reasonable. But there aren't very many of them. So if you ask your manager for 3 bids for something like that, your manager will be lucky to come up with 2 good bids. And that's something that you may have to communicate to your owners because of that magic number of 3 that the government's been using. And we all know that the government has ways of getting around it. We wouldn't be spending, what is it, $75 on a hammer or whatever it is if they use that system all the time. Even the government has a way of getting around 3 bids. But you have to think about the reasonableness and think of the amount. Also, when does it have to be done? If it's an emergency, as we said before, it's an emergency. Emergency means now. You do it now. You don't do bids. That's when you rely on your manager to say, look, I know somebody who can get out there fast, they know what they're doing, and the work will be done properly and expeditiously. The time of year makes a difference. Sometimes if you're all happy with your landscaping company now, and it gets to be the winter time and you're still happy, and it comes May, and the landscaping company did a terrible job on their first cut, and they didn't show up for their usual end of winter thing until May. You're mad. You say, okay, to the manager, go out and get me some bids for grounds care. It's May. It's going to be very difficult for your manager to find anybody who has the time, even if they have the inclination, to have the time to come out to your property and thoroughly survey it and give you a good bid. So if you do get a bid, you might get one that is either underbid because he was guessing, or overbid because he didn't want to take the time and just wanted to throw in a dollar amount. So the timing of requests for bid, be thinking about things all year. As I say, you don't think about the pool pump in May, you don't think about the landscaping in May. Now's the time to be thinking about some of those contracts that you would like to bid out. Even if you think you're going to be doing, let's just say, a major roofing project or a major woodworking project, painting, there's no harm in planning ahead. If you know that you're going to be doing that next spring, now is the time that we need to be putting together those specifications, meeting with the contractors, giving them the leisure to put together a very good bid for you so that you have the time to make a decision. You can tell the owners what the decision is, and then you can go on and have the work starting in the spring or whatever it is. Timing is important. The specialization, and I'll mention this again, but the specialization, sometimes these jobs are so specialized that you will have a contractor who knows how to do the work, but he does not know how to spec it. In other words, he will do what someone else tells him to do, and he'll do a very good job. Lifting foundations is a good example. But he isn't the engineer. So in some cases, your manager is going to say to you, you know what, I know a really good foundation company, but we're going to need an engineer to come out here and evaluate so that we can tell these companies what they have to do. And that takes time. Sometimes you don't, and sometimes it's a rush. And the other thing, just as an extension of that, but sometimes even when you get the bid, these companies that are highly specialized don't come out like that. So if it's something, again, if we've been slow at our end, remember they're often going to be slow at their end because they're so backed up. Again, because they're specialized and because they're good. So you can't say, well, you know, it's been 3 weeks and these guys still aren't out here and, you know, we need to have this done. If it's not an emergency, you know, you're just going to have to stay in line. So sometimes when you can anticipate, it's nice to be able to do just that and give your contractor enough notice. This is very important. The board's fiduciary responsibility is not to accept the lowest bid, but the best bid. And there again, if you've done your homework, you've worked with your manager, we know the quality of the vendor, we know that he or she has good experience in this particular work, you're going to be very comfortable in explaining to your owners why you didn't take the lowest bid to completely paint all of the public buildings in your community association. Your clubhouse and your pool building and all of your signs, all stuff. They'll say, well, I know this guy, and I told him about this, and he said, oh, he could do it for $20,000 less. And you could say, yes, but we know he's insured, we know he's the best. And we looked at the quality of the work, and we want quality for our association. Value and quality, those are two big words. Always remind your owners. Don't get caught with that lowest bidder stuff because you can really come unstuck. Sometimes we'll see a bid and we'll say, there is no way that this contractor is going to do the work that's required, even if you gave them specifications for this dollar amount. I told some of you were here a couple of months ago, and this is an extremist situation, but a board member found a contractor online to do some gutter work. No, that's not true. I think it was pressure washing. And they ended up doing both. But the guy comes to the property and said, yes, I can do it. He looked at the property and he gave the man a price. And they said, oh, but I don't have the equipment. The whole association is going to have to buy the equipment. And besides that, I underbid it. I need half as much again. I need 50% more. And the manager's saying, no. And that all kind of got straightened out. But you've got specifications, but you also want to make sure that that price is reasonable. And that's where we come in because we see a lot of this. You may think that something is a good price, and it may just be an unreasonable price. Requests for proposal. Now, you can get really, really complicated in these requests for proposals, which are also known as RFPs. In essence, when we approach a company, a vendor, a service provider, on behalf of you as the board of directors, we tell the vendor what you want. Those are the specifications. They can be this thick, or they can be a couple of paragraphs. It depends on the job. We have to know what you want. Some cases it may even be verbal. Sometimes that's all you need. When we obtain bids for your grounds care, for example, the manager and or a landscaping committee will literally walk the property with the vendor rather than just give them a map so that they understand exactly what you want. These bushes get done twice a year, those bushes get done once a year. These crepe myrtles we're shaping into trees, so you're going to do something else with them. All that, so that which takes a lot of time. So the vendor will know what you want. He has some kind of an RFP. For very technical jobs, it may be that you have other sources that you can use to provide this. We're not engineers, so we can't write specifications for lifting a building, repairing a foundation. Doing something where major structural work has to be done. We're going to say to you, you need to have an engineer. This is a person who specializes in roofs. This is a person who's a building engineer who can guide you in this. And you're going to have to make that investment. And this is where a lot of boards miss out because they look at it as wasted money, and it isn't. Because then you are 100% relying on your vendor. And as good as that person, a company may be, they may do something wrong, Or there may be two ways of doing something, and they like one way, and this is the case where the other way would have been better. We don't always know that. Many of the times when you're dealing with these more complicated things, you're dealing with things that we don't even see. You know, when they talk about a foundation, we don't see the foundation. We're looking at some stuff around the edge, the brick or the block, or maybe some stack, whatever. We're not looking at the foundation. We're not looking at what's under the building. Engineer is a person we need to tell us this is what needs to happen. This is how far you have to go. This is how it's going to affect the other units. You see, so we sometimes have to bring in a consultant. In the request for proposal, the specifications are one part. You need to tell the vendor something about the association. I would do this in writing. We try to do this so that they know something before they go out. It may be something they're not interested in. You know, we're a condominium association. We have 27 frame buildings. We are a homeowners association that has 7 miles of wood fencing that we want to, that is wood shadow, it won't be shadow box, we'll just say wood shadow box fencing that needs to be replaced. All fences will be 6 feet high. Difficulties that you will have is that you will be on private property almost all the time. You know, giving the vendor some information, which we will do, will help him or her in putting together a bid and really deciding if they want a bid. We also, in our request for proposal, if we don't know them, want to know something about the company. Landscaping, and I keep mentioning that because we all have landscaping, a lot or a little. Landscapers, we want to know what kind of equipment they have. We've had some wonderful bids come in. I mean, they are creative. They will tell us what they're going to do, and they can even do trees. The limit is usually 12 feet. Nope, they'll go over to 15 feet. They'll trim trees up to 15 feet. They will come in and they will do the shrubs. They will do the mulching. They will do this. They'll all this pre-treating, do all these wonderful things. And you say, well, that's good. That's just wonderful. And what kind of crews do you have? And they say, oh, it's just me. What kind of equipment do you have? Well, I've got a riding mower. And you say, okay, we're 16 acres or whatever we are. There is no way. Well, I know I can do it because, you know, I just figured out that I can do this and I'm just getting started. We needed to learn something about, and Jean's laughing, but actually it's happened. It happens all the time. People want to get into the business. We had a landscaping company give us what looked like a wonderful proposal, and the manager called him, and he wasn't even in the state. He had never been to Tennessee, and he wanted a landscaping contract to maintain one of our townhome communities. And one of the board members recommended him because he'd heard about him. He had no equipment and no employees. Yeah. But we need to know something about the company. References, a lot of times we'll call references if we don't know them personally. And sometimes, you know, we've worked with people and we haven't had very good luck and we will never speak badly of someone, but sometimes we may suggest that if you're going to get a bid from that person that we maybe make sure that you know what equipment they have, or, you know, get a little bit more information so that you can learn more about that vendor when you're making your decision. What are specifications? They're detailed instructions about the products or services that you want. As I say, they can be as detailed as you like. We had landscaping is a common one. Again, how many do you want to include? Flowers? Do you want to get rid of the flowers and go to something that doesn't have to be maintained? Do you want the irrigation included in your landscaping company contract, or do you want to have somebody else do that? What does the irrigation include? Is there a minimal? Does it include winterization? That's big. You know, you're gonna have one. Does it include the turn-on? What happens if parts? Is there a limit in the dollar amount? There's a certain number of dollars that they're willing to expend in the springtime when they turn the sprinklers back on. So there's always something. There's always something that has to be replaced. You know, they might say, well, no, you know, we're not going to charge you for heads, or up to 10 feet will be okay, or something like that. Make sure that, you know, we will make sure for you that those specifications are clear. And we don't get into about June and somebody says, well, I thought they were going to take care of the irrigation too. And we say, no, that was 2 companies before, and this guy's, you know, they're just cutting the grass. So they say we include the specifications in the RFP, and also whatever we said in the RFP needs to be in the contract, because they said they were going to do it. We want the contract to say they're going to do it, all right? Now, that brings up something that I don't really cover in this per se. Many vendors submit a proposal with a signature line, all right? If the board decides to choose that, make sure that there's some commitment there. We'll talk in just a few minutes about what a good contract should have. And just signing that may make you very unhappy later on. They may have no commitment at all. I've seen roofing contracts, actually, where they propose to do whatever it is and all this stuff, and then they never show up. They just never show up. And you're waiting for them, and they just kind of fall off the edge of the earth, and manager can't get in touch with them. They say, oh, well, I got this really big job, and I'm working out of town now. So there's no commitment. You didn't know you've lost all this time because there was nothing on their proposal sheet that committed them to a time frame, which is one of the ones that we're talking about. So it's easy. It's very easy to just sign that, but we want to make sure that it says what you said in your specification. If it didn't, it doesn't have to be complicated. We can get the specification sheet. We can get the proposal sheet. We can get some quick language that ties them together. This is if you don't want to spend money on an attorney, and then that can be signed by both parties. Both parties. You want somebody from the board of directors to sign the contract, not your manager. We're only your agent in this. Somebody from the board of directors needs to sign the contract, and they need to sign it. Make them sign it. We will make them sign it. Oh, the guy says, I'm in a hurry, I'll do it tomorrow and all that stuff. Hey, you don't have a contract if both of you haven't signed. So that's very, very important. And sometimes there may be a delay. So if your manager has some reason, that sometimes things happen. Maybe we don't know the vendor. Or we think that this job is so important, well, they're all important, but it's so important that we want to make sure that everything is absolutely right. It's very, very, maybe time is an issue or something like that. We might say we have to wait until the vendor signs that contract. See, there are no laws in this state about all this stuff, so we have to, not like some states. But so we might say, let's just wait a couple of days. I've got the contract, I've faxed him or I've emailed him the contract, get it back. Once we have his signature, then we'll be able to start. So there's a reason for that. And basically the old thing that they, who, what, when, where, and how. And the how would be, just going backwards, the how would be what equipment he's going to use. He may tell you what his crews are. Sometimes you want to know whether there's going to be an English-speaking person on the site. And that can be a very big deal. If you have a lot of owners who are coming out, who are always wanting to tell the contractors what to do and all that stuff, it's good for them to have an English-speaking person on the site. That seems like a silly thing, but in landscaping, it's the reality. There are grounds care people, and having and knowing who, or at least having us know who that person is also helpful. How often they're going to do it, which is the when, where they're going to do it. Sometimes when you have jobs that are staged, we've had them where you're going to be doing massive renovation work. And the job's going to last a couple of years, or maybe just a year. That's a long time. How are these people going to get their equipment to and from the property? Where are they going to put it? Is it going to interfere with your parking? Will their crews be uniformed so that if anybody sees them, they know they belong on the property? Now, this is true. You don't always think of these things, but you want to anticipate so that somebody doesn't get a call that I got one time, and this woman said, well, there's this bare-shirted guy on my roof. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, he's up there and I don't know what he's doing. I'm afraid to go outside. So I called my contractor and I said, I thought you were going out. He had subbed it, never used him again, needless to say. Yeah, he'd subbed it out to some people, and these people were just, they could have been anybody. He wore a shirt, but he just subbed it out and they were going to let them do the job. And of course, this poor lady was petrified. So, how are the people going to be dressed? Good vendors, the ones that we deal with, are used to working with community associations. They know those concerns, and they will tell you these things. That's really nice when that happens. And if they don't, we know to ask. And it's good for you to know as well, so that you know why we're asking these questions, that it's not just something silly relating to something that doesn't pertain to your association. We talked briefly about getting good specs. One I didn't mention is a committee, and the landscaping is a good example. And it could be something like maintaining your clubhouse or your public areas. You may have decided that you want to have someone clean the clubhouse on a regular basis. Well, one of the things you're going to have to decide is, what does that mean? What does that mean? Do they just come in and vacuum once a week? Are they there only after events? How often do the floors get cleaned? What about windows? Flies love to make, or rather spiders love to make nests, or what are they called, webs in window sills. How does that stuff get taken care of? What about the ceiling fans when they get all dusty? Now, the people to give that to will be your clubhouse committee if it isn't the board, because they know that place really well. They're the ones who handle the rentals, and they'll say, when they come in, they're always complaining about those flies that are caught in the spider webs on the windowsills. Okay, you know, that's something that has to be in there. Write it down. It's okay to put it in there. So that when that company comes in, if it's a single person or a pair of people, whatever, they know exactly what you expect. And it can include the periodic cleaning. Windows, often forgotten. Some floors have to be stripped and waxed on a regular basis, which is a pain in the neck. What about carpet cleaning? Will they be responsible for that, or is that going to be separate? Your committee can do that. Pool committee. We have an association with an active pool committee, and they became very much involved in the whole that whole pool renovation I was talking about a little while ago, to the point that they knew about pumps that were replaced and fans that were replaced, and they got into the whole thing with the restrooms that had to be renovated, all of these things, and a committee did this. They knew what the community wanted. They gave those specifications, they gave them to the manager, and then the manager gave them to a couple of vendors, and then the board of directors chose. So it doesn't always have to be something that's prepared by an engineer. You just have to know what you want and find the people who can put that together for you. Sometimes it's just you and us, the board and the manager. I mentioned other contracts, consultants. As I say, sometimes we have to bring in a consultant if it's very technical, and then the manufacturer. So we've got a lot of sources, again, specifications, and I must say sometimes it's verbal. I mean, sometimes walking around the property with some very general statement to the landscaping company and giving them a map, we're showing them where we've been, showing them the areas so that they understand what's involved. They're not just looking at a map, but then they can work from that. So don't feel it always has to be this great big technical thing. You can sometimes, you have to think about the people who are doing the job. If you get something really technical to someone who's cleaning your clubhouse, that person's going to be very discouraged. They don't care about all this stuff. It doesn't need to be an AIA contract here. This is not a contract to clean, I don't know, some office tower downtown. So, kind of think about how that relates to what's being done. Consider the people you're dealing with and make it reasonable. And there again, your manager's always there to help with that. We do help you get the specifications. Sometimes, as I say, we can put them together. But generally, we're going to get them for you. And then we will send the request for proposal. And at this point, if it's a really complicated job, you're going to have a lot of interaction with your manager, because your manager is going to be checking with you on every step of the way. Is this really what you want? This is what I am going to ask this company to do for you. Is that what you mean? Because this is what I'm going to ask them. Do you want more or do you want less? Do you want it more frequently? Do you want something differently? After the manager gathers the bids, the manager will present them to the board of directors. Now, some associations have a committee structure, which is quite nice, where a committee may review the bids because it's in their specialty, and then make a recommendation to the board of directors. Most of you don't do that, but that's really a nice way to do it. If you've got a pool committee, you have a landscaping committee, if you have them handle that, not only does it reduce your burden, but it spreads that whole involvement in the process. More people are going to be buying into the decision. You don't have to do you don't always have to follow the recommendation of the landscaping committee. But if you've got good people, they are looking out for the interests of the association. They're going to come back with good stuff for you that maybe you didn't think about. I'm not a plants person, for example. I know the bushes and the trees and all that stuff. I always had to leave that to somebody else. I was delighted when there was somebody who had that expertise and could say, well, these people are really going to do this and this is what we need. So take advantage of the talent in your community. We will also tell the bidder. You notice I'm saying, see what the manager's doing? Sometimes the board of directors is really tempted to deal directly with the vendor. That doesn't mean I'm not saying you can't talk to them, but I am saying that it is a business relationship. And using the manager as your go-between, particularly in these early stages, getting the bids and awarding the bids after the board signed it, that's really good because it helps you keep your distance. You don't want to ever give your owners the impression that you played favorites. And sometimes the board has chosen somebody you know, because that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the owners can perceive, once they get unhappy in the smallest thing, they're going to accuse the board of directors of playing favorites. How come they didn't get their brother-in-law who would have done a better job cheaper, and it's really a favorite, and this guy isn't doing a good job anyway. But if you say, you know what, we've been working with the manager, we're the decision makers, the manager's been involved in all of this, so that we can conduct this in a business-like way, that definitely helps not only the actual legitimacy, but also the appearance of legitimacy to what you do. Because the appearance is always, always important. That's reality. That's reality. It's appearance. I did mention this before, but if a consultant or a particular type of vendor is needed, we will share that with you. We love to share all this stuff. We learn all these things from all our associations, so we just love to share it with you. And then regarding payments, that's something that we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about the bid and the contract. But sometimes you don't want to pay the vendor all at once. A lot of times, if it's a one-time job, and if that's the case, we all want to know what that arrangement is going to be. Many vendors will come in with a schedule for you. That does not mean that that is the only way it can be done. And if that doesn't happen to work with what you want to do, that becomes something that you negotiate with the vendor, right? That's what I see Stephanie's. They will say, well, I expect to get paid 1/3 on signing of the contract. I expect to get the second third after say $5,000 is worth, or say $15,000 is done, and then 100% within 3 days of notification that the job is completed. Well, let's just say it's a $20,000 job. He's getting 2/3 of his payment when he says he's completed $15,000 of the work, which you have no idea what that point is, right? And so he's got 2/3 of it, and then he wants full payment when he says he's finished. That doesn't do you any good. You've got to have some time in there to have somebody check it, make sure that he's done everything he was supposed to do, and all the rest of it. And that may involve a committee. It may involve owner input. It may involve all kinds of things. So don't look at it and say, oh, well, I guess that's the way it is. We really like him. He was the best one. We'll sign away. Say, to the manager, this isn't going to work. We don't want this payment arrangement. And most contractors will as long as it's reasonable. I mean, they need some money. But you don't want to, paying for materials is one thing. But when you're starting to pay for materials and people, and nobody's ever shown up yet, that's waving a lot of red flags for us. And so we make sure that what you sign, that you're very comfortable with it. And if you're not comfortable with it, tell us. We stand back and we look at it. You will be talking with the vendors. I'm not saying you don't. Many times the vendor will make a presentation to the board of directors. You also, many of you are lead people on your boards of directors, so you become the liaison with, say, the landscaping company or the pool company. That is very good. That's not what I was talking about. I was just talking about in the bid process, just try to keep that, work with the manager, keep the manager informed. The other thing is that when we receive the bids, sometimes it's better to hold all the bids. I keep thinking 3, and there aren't necessarily 3. But if you're getting more than 1 bid, sometimes the manager will hold all 3 bids, or 4 bids, or 2 bids, or whatever it is, rather than give them to you piecemeal. In some cases, if they think they're not going to get them all in a timely fashion, they may just give them to you as you receive them. The danger with doing it piecemeal as they come in is, again, there could be some information that would be shared that could affect later submittals. And you do remember this is a business. You don't ever want to be having anybody think that anybody who happened to submit their bid later was given some preference. We're very, very sensitive to that here. And just to use Gertner Maintenance only, and there's a reason for this as an example, is that they are a separate company, and if they are allowed to bid or invited to bid on something, they never know, ever, because they are a vendor. They're an outside company just as much as any roofing company or anybody else is. And so we're very, very careful to make sure that vendors all are kept separate. And you as board members need to know that too. Nobody in this room would do that, but it could be that one of your committee members or one of your other board members who didn't even think, and people don't do things to be wrong, it's just they don't think of the ramifications. And they might just say, oh, can you believe we just got a bid for $15,000? And somebody says, oh, really? Well, Joe hasn't submitted his. I'll bet I can get him to come in for 13. That really wasn't the way to do it, and that gave him an unfair advantage, even though there was no intent that be the case. Ideal specifications, and I've actually got 2 slides. The ones that are italics are the ones that I would say are basic to a contract. And of course, who's in the contract? That seems silly. We've seen sometimes where somebody has wanted to sign a proposal that it was a generic form from a vendor and it doesn't say anywhere at all who you are. Doesn't name this community association. So we want to know who the parties are to the contract. We want to know who they are, where they are, and how to get in touch with them. That means contract or something that we have needs to have their telephone number, their address, and preferably an email and website, but at least email. The time period, how long is this going to take? If it's a landscaping contract, are you signing it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Whether the payment terms, we talked about that. Landscapers, a lot of landscapers like to be paid a month in advance. Maybe some of you don't know that. But on the first of the month, the bill that you're paying is for the month that just started, not the month that just finished. You might want to think about that. They don't like it the other way, but I have seen contractors do that. That's pretty common in Nashville. How are you going to pay them? Let's just say it's a year contract for grounds care. All right, well, we all know that season is gradually coming to a close right now, and they don't do very much from December until March. They do some things, but not very much. Are you going to pay them in 12 equal installments, or are you going to pay them according to what they do in the course of the year? What happens if you don't like them and it's June? Or no, it's just you don't like them, you were able to part company and it's August. You want to have something in there about what happens for cancellation. If there's, you say, okay, if we don't get along, there's a 30-day notice or whatever we decided to agree on. But what happens if that contract ends early? Are you going to end up paying? Are you going to end up paying more than you thought? Because you may be in a situation, you are in August, he figures he hasn't been fully paid yet. He's spreading out his payments into December for his cash flow. But he has already done most of his work for the year. And that has been, we've seen that as a bone of contention. So when you think, how are you going to be paid? That's the question, how are you going to be paid? Are materials included? Very common with pool companies. Some of them include some things and they don't include others. We want to know what's included in the job. The material selection, who decides? And with painters, that's two huge schools of thought on that, absolutely, totally separate. One group of people says that the painter should never buy the paint because you're ending up paying top price and you don't know what he's getting, even if you spec'd it. And you said you wanted Porter or whatever the other paints are, Sherwin-Williams or something. The other group says, no, you should buy the paint as the association because this way you know what you're getting. Whichever it is, you need to know. Painters will generally tell you that they can get a better price. If it's a reputable painter, you know they're going to get the brand that you got. And I'm kind of in that school too because I don't want to go running around getting paint. They know the grade. You don't know the grade. They know the grade. They get the colors blended right. They know the brand. They know how to put it on, all the rest of it. But you need to know who's going to select the materials. You don't want to be surprised with somebody submitting a materials bill to you. Some smaller jobs can be that way. Tools and equipment. There again, what tools and equipment will they use? Some jobs you may need to know that. Certainly grounds care company, if you've got any kind of land at all, you want to know what kind of equipment that they have and how often they will be there. Again, penalties. Is there a penalty? And it's always one way. They're going to put stuff in penalties for you. If you decide to end the contract early, they're going to have something in there that says you're going to have to pay them a month or the rest of the year or whatever it is. What about the other way? What if they don't perform? What if they don't show up? What's going to happen? What if you've paid them that 10% down or the $5,000 and they never show up? It happens. It happens. We didn't. There was a very, very well-known roofing company that literally closed its doors on a Friday and told everybody the following Monday. And we had contracts all over the place with this company. Absolutely no prediction that this was going to happen at all. None. None at all.
Reputable.
Reputable. Oh, absolutely. It was yeah, just nobody could see this. He literally told his people don't come in on Monday, and he told the management companies on Monday. What would have happened had we prepaid him for some work? You want to have something in there that covers this in some way. Storage, I mentioned before, if it's going to be a big job, where's this stuff going to be stored? If they say, oh, well, there's a great staging over there in that parking area, and you're going to lose 10 parking spaces for 2 months, you may want to think about that. Make sure that's established in advance. Again, we're doing the thinking for you in many cases. You need to be aware of it. What happens if there's damage? Don't assume that if the grounds care, if the roofing guy absolutely destroys a gutter, he's doing something or other and the whole gutter falls off, which means the downspout came off too, what happens? Is he going to be responsible for that? Doesn't have to be a lot of language, just something in there. Insurance requirements. We require that all the vendors that you work with have workers' compensation. They should have some liability. We make sure they have some liability. Bigger jobs, we may need to bring somebody in so that they can give us some recommendation on what the levels would be. Sometimes you may want a bond. Not usually, but sometimes a bond is appropriate. If this is an electrical job or a plumbing job of any size, you're going to need to have somebody who's licensed. You want to have them show that they are licensed. And that needs to be in the contract, in the specifications, and then in the contract. Guarantees and warranties. Roofing, always seem to be using roofing lately. But your roofing contract has 2 warranties. One is the workmanship. Generally in this area it's a year. Sometimes you'll see a 2-year workmanship warranty. That means that the guy didn't, if it's a I will say it's a slate roof, or not a slate roof, but a tile roof, that he didn't hammer it right and a couple tiles came off, all right? Then there is the roofing warranty for the roofing, and that warranty is provided by the manufacturer. Now those materials warranties many times are like your car battery, which has a warranty. And if your battery is 5 years old, you're going to get less money for it when actually you probably won't get anything. If it's say 3 years old and your battery dies, you're going to get less money or credit than you would have it if it died after 6 months. That's the way roofs are, because roofs wear out just as batteries do. So the roofer is not going to give you, he's going to make you prove that the roof is damaged. So you have to send back the shingles, which is usually you, not the vendor, and which is us. And then they look at it and they say, oh, well, no, that's just abnormal wear and tear, or we'll give you $3 or something like that. So know that. It's not going to make too much difference to your decisions, but the first thing we ask when a roof goes after about 8 years is, well, we'll just, is it under warranty? Yeah. But the workmanship warranty is already expired, and you can kind of forget it for the materials in most cases. You end up just re-roofing, and that's unfortunate. Really more protects you in the earlier phases of the job, of the work. Working hours. Is it okay for them to work Sunday mornings or Sunday afternoon? Is it okay to work on Saturday? Do you want them to finish at 6 o'clock? What do you not want them to start before 9? Depending upon your homeowners association and the noise and whatever that this is going to generate. It could be if you're doing some paving that you want everybody to move their cars and the work won't start before 9, so that most people have had the opportunity to leave and go to work. Labor supervision, I mentioned that. English is nice, and I don't mean to say it in a funny way, but it is important. And are they going to be supervised? Is there going to be a supervisor, one person who is responsible for what everybody else does on the job? And who is that person? Many companies have teams. They have a whole team system, and they will explain that too. Very, very nice way of doing it. And cleanup. And do they clean up every day? Do they clean up twice a day, once a week at the end of the job? All of that makes a difference, because you and your owners are going to be living with whatever this is. If you're in a building with a lobby and you're doing a massive paint job, do you want to have all of your visitors and residents coming in and seeing a pile of paint cans in a corner covered up with a tarp and a couple of ladders leaning against the wall? Or are you going to require that they take that stuff off site? Usually they'll anticipate this, but it's good for you to be thinking of this too. Contract. We have 3 types of contracts, and we've really talked about them all. One is the service contract, and your service contract is usually your pool company. The people come out a couple times a week, 3 to 5 times a week, maybe as often as 6, and they check the chemicals in your pool, and they make the adjustments, and they clean them, vacuum the pool, and they make sure that everything in the pump house is working, and probably going to be available to you at an extra cost if the pump goes down. Grounds care company, the same thing. That's a service contract. Service contract is the trash pickup guy, even though he isn't, cleaning anything or maintaining anything. That's still a service contract. A specific repair contract. That's going to be interesting. We'll see how that works. A specific repair contract, and that's just what it seems to be. And then you have a maintenance contract. So you have the 3 different kinds, and preventative. So you've got service. You've got specific repair, and then you have a preventive contract. And preventive, an example, is the elevator. Another one, which some of you have, and maybe people would disagree, but I consider a sprinkler, your fire sprinklers like what we have in this building, in a sense, that's a preventive contract, because they are preventing further damage in the case of a fire. They check the lights. Well, it's a different group. They check the lights. They check the signs. They check the sprinklers. We have whole fire systems that are inspected on an annual basis, and that is a preventive contract. You could also call it a service contract, but in the sense that it's preventing damage. You can see how that goes. So there are 3 different kinds of contracts. The last part. Evaluating and monitoring. We do all this, and what do? You don't just kind of walk away You've established at the very beginning what you want your standards to be. Many of the things that you do are not the special jobs. They're the long-term jobs. You make the decision about a landscaping company, and chances are you're going to keep them for a long time. If you have a company that just does the flowers, once you like them, you tend to stick with them. So you make you do a lot of that thinking at the beginning, and then how do you evaluate it? One of the ways that you evaluate it is simply by listening and hearing what people say. If everybody says, this has never looked better in our lives, since the place has been built, you know you've done the right thing. If they say, this is really good, but they're messing up the signs, or I wish that you would now replace the sign, or something or other with the entrance, or the lobby, or the painting. Your feedback is definitely a part of it. You have to consider what your goal was in terms of a level of maintenance, look at all of the different areas of maintenance that you have, of the different types, and then see if you are meeting those goals. The routine, what is done on a routine basis is so important. We've got some signs here, we have loads of them downstairs of many communities that we manage, and this is your signature. And I didn't always know this when I was on board, but this is, for most of you, that's your signature. If you say you live in a community, somebody says, boy, I know that place, they have knockout flowers. I love the way that place looks in the fall because they always put up pumpkins. They have the neatest sign, it always has a sharp look. They must have it painted every year. All those things give your community an identity, and they're the things that are routine. Not letting it get where it needs the paint, where it needs to have the stonework fixed, where it needs to have a pier rebuilt because the brickwork has deteriorated. You maintain it, and that becomes a routine. Maintaining it and is routine. Again, longer life of your property, and I did mention the emergencies. I think that is, yeah, I will say that in the middle. More than just satisfactory. You're on their board of directors because you care about the place that you live in. And a lot of other people do too. But don't feel uncomfortable to try to bring it up to the standard that you would like it to be, within your means, whatever they are, as a community. You play an incredibly important role in your community, and I really hope that this little discussion this morning helped you. Thank you very much.